But the +1, -1 lever is too crude for this. Right. We should give them a pointer or something so they can specify individual elements they don't like. You want to encourage this, don't you? Lester nodded vigorously. Of course I do. I just thought that you'd be a little less enthusiastic about it. You know, because so much of the new work stuff is being de-emphasized, you kidding. This is what the new work was all about, group creation. I cool DNT be happier about it. Seriously, this is so much cooler than anything that I could have built. And now with the network coming online soon, wow. Imagine it. It's going to be so fucking weird. Bro, amen, Lester said. He looked at his watch and yelped. Shit, late for a date. Can you get yourself home? Sure, Perry said. Brought my wheels. See you later, have a good one. She's amazing, Lester said. Used to weigh 900 pounds and was shut in for 10 years. Man, has she got an imagination on her. She can do this thing. Perry put his hands over his ears. La la la, I am not listening to you. TMI, Lester. Seriously. Way TMI. Lester shook his head. You are such a prude. Dude. Perry thought about Hilda for a fleeting moment, and then grinned. That's me, a total Puritan. Go. Be safe, sound, and slippery. Lester said, and got in his car. Perry looked around at the shuttered market, rooftops glinting in the rosy tropical sunset. Man, he missed those sunsets. He snorted up damp lungs full of the tropical air and smelled dinners cooking at the shantytown across the street. It was different and bigger and more elaborate every time he visited it, which was always less often than he wished. There was a good barbecue place there. Dirty Max's, just a hole in the wall with a pit out back and the friendliest people. There was always a mob scene around there, locals greasy from the ribs in their hands, a big bucket overflowing with discarded bones. Wandering towards it, he was amazed by how much bigger it had grown since his last visit. Most buildings had 2 stories, though a few had 3. Now almost all had 4, leaning drunkenly toward each other across the streets. Power cables, network cables and clotheslines gave the overhead spaces the look of a carelessly spun spider's web. The new stories were most remarkable because of what Francis had explained to him about the way that additional stories got added. Most people rented out or sold the right to build on top of their buildings, and then the new upstairs neighbors in turn sold their rights on. Sometimes you'd get a third-story dweller who'd want to build atop 2 adjacent buildings to make an extra-wide apartment for a big family, and that required negotiating with all of the owners of each floor of both buildings. Just looking at it made his head hurt with all the tangled property and ownership relationships embodied in the high spaces. He heard the easy chatter out the open windows and music and crying babies. Kids ran through the streets, laughing and chasing each other or bouncing balls or playing some kind of networked RPG with their phones that had them peeking around corners, seeing another player and shrieking and running off. The grill woman at the barbecue joint greeted him by name and the men and women around it made space for him. It was friendly and companionable, and after a moment Francis wandered up with a couple of his protégés. They carried boxes of beer. Hey, Francis said. Home again. Huh, home again, Perry said. He wiped rib sauce off his fingers and shook Francis's hand warmly. God. I've missed this place, we missed having you. Francis said. Big crowds across the way. Too. Seems like you hit on something. Perry shook his head and smiled and ate his ribs. What's the story around here? Lots and lots. Francis said. There's a whole net community thing happening. Lots of traffic on the AARP message boards from other people setting these up around the country, so you've hit on something. 2. Nah. When it's railroading time. You get railroads. When it's squatter time, you get squats. You know they want to open a 7-Eleven here. No. Perry laughed and choked on ribs and then guzzled some beer to wash it all down. Francis put a wrinkled hand over his heart. He still wore his wedding band. Perry saw, despite his wife's being gone for decades. I swear it. Just there. He pointed to one of the busier corners. And, we told them to fuck off. Francis said. We've got lots of community-owned businesses around here that do everything a 7-Eleven could do for us, without taking the wealth out of our community and sending it to some corporate jack-off. Some soreheads wanted to see how much money we could get out of them, but I just kept telling them whatever 7-Eleven gives us, it'll only be because they think they can get more out of us. They saw reason. Besides, I am in charge. I always win my arguments. You are the most benevolent of dictators. Perry said. He began to work on another beer. Beer tasted better outside in the heat and the barbecue smoke. I am glad someone thinks so. Francis said. Oh, the 7-Eleven thing left a lot of people pissed at me. There's plenty around here that don't remember the way it started off. To them, I am just some altar cocker who's keeping them down. Is it serious? Perry knew that there was the potential for serious, major lawlessness from his little settlement. It wasn't a failing condo complex rented out to Filipina domestics and weird entrepreneurs like him. It was a place where the cops would love an excuse to come in with riot batons, his funny eyebrow twitched, and gas, the kind of place where there almost certainly were a few very bad people living their lives. Miami had bad people, too, but the bad people in Miami weren't his problem. And the bad people and the potential chaos were what he loved about the place. 2. He'd grown up in the kind of place where everything was predictable and safe, and he'd hated every minute of it. The glorious chaos around him was just as he liked it. The wood smoke curled up his nose, fragrant and all-consuming. I don't know anymore. I thought I'd retire and settle down and take up painting. Now I am basically a mob boss. Not the bad kind, but still. It's a lot of work. Pimpin' ain't easy. Perry saw the shocked look on Francis's face and added hastily. Sorry, not calling you a pimp. It's a song lyric is all. We got pimps here now. Whores. Too. You name it, we got it. It's still a good place to live, better than Miami, if you ask me, but it could go real animal. Bad animal. Hard to believe, standing there in the wood smoke, licking his fingers, drinking his beer. His cold seemed to have been baked out by the steamy swampy heat. Well, Francis, if anyone knows how to keep peace, it's you. Social workers come around, say the same thing. But there's people around here with little kids, they worry that the social workers could force them out. Take away their children. It wasn't like Francis to complain like this, it wasn't in his nature, but here it was. The strain of running things was showing on him. Perry wondered if his own strain was showing that way. Did he complain more these days? Maybe he did. An uncomfortable silence descended upon them. Perry drank his beer. Morosely. He thought of how ridiculous it was to be morose about the possibility that he was being morose, but there you had it. Finally his phone rang and saved him from further conversation. He looked at the display and shook his head. It was Kettlewell again. That first voicemail had made him laugh aloud, but when they hadn't called back for a couple days, he'd figured that they had just had a little too much wine and placed the call. Now they were calling back, and it was still pretty early on the West Coast. Too early for them to have had too much wine, unless they'd really changed. Perry. It was Kettlebelly. He sounded like he might be drunk, or merely punch drunk with excitement. Perry remembered that he got that way sometimes. Kettlewell, how are you doing? I am here too. Perry. I cashed in my return ticket. Suzanne, yeah. She said. She too sounded punchy, like they'd been having a fit of the giggles just before calling. Kettlewell's family have taken me in, wayward wanderer that I am. You two sound pretty. Happy, we've been having an amazing time. Kettlewell said. His speakerphone made him sound like he was at the bottom of a well. Mostly reminiscing about you guys. What the hell are you up to? We tried to follow it on the net, but it's all jumbled. What's this about a story? Story, I keep reading about this ride of yours and its story. I didn't make any sense of it. I haven't read any of this, but Lester and I were talking about some stuff to do with stories tonight. I didn't know anyone else was talking about this. Though, where do you see it? I'll email it to you. Suzanne said. I was going to blog it tonight anyway, so you two are just hanging around San Francisco giggling and walking down memory lane. Well, yeah. It's about time. Too. We've all been separated for too long. We want a reunion. Perry, a reunion. We want to come down for a visit and see what you redoing and hang out. You wouldn't believe how much fun we've been having. Perry, seriously. Kettlewell sounded like he'd been huffing nitrous or something. Have you been having fun? He thought about the question. Kind of. He told them about his travels, a quick thumbnail sketch, struggling to remember which city he'd been to when, leaving out the crazy sex which came back to him in a rush, that night with Hilda in the coffin, like a warm hallucination. On balance, yes. It's been fun, right, so we want to come down and have fun with you and Lester. He's still hanging around. Right. Lester had told him about the history he had with Suzanne, and there was something in the way she asked after Lester that suggested to Perry that there was still something there. You kidding? You'd have to pry us apart with a crowbar, see? I told you so, Suzanne said. This guy thought that Lester might have gotten bored and wandered off, never. Plus anyone who follows his message board traffic and blogs would know that he was right here, minding the shop. And you rereading his blog, aren't you? Suzanne. He didn't need to say it. He could almost hear her blush over the line. So how about tomorrow, for what, for us coming to town? I'll bring the wife and kids. We'll rent out a couple hotel rooms and spend a week there. It'll be a blast, tomorrow. We could get the morning flight and be there for breakfast. You got a good hotel. Not a coffin hotel. Not with the kids. Perry's heart beat faster. He did miss these two, and they were so punchy, so gleeful. He'd love to see them. He muted his phone. Hey, Francis. That guest house down the road, is it still running, Lulu's? Sure. They just built another story and took over the top floor of the place next door, perfect. He unmuted. How do you like to stay in a squatter guest house in the shantytown? Kettlewell said, but Suzanne laughed. Oh hell yes. She said. Get that look off your face. Kettlewell, this is an adventure, we love it. Kettlewell said. Great. I'll make you a reservation. How long are you staying, until we leave? Suzanne said. Right. Perry said and laughed himself. They were different people. These two, from the people he remembered, but they were also old friends. And they were coming to see him tomorrow. Okay, let me go make your reservations. Francis walked him over and the landlord fussed over the two of them like they were visiting dignitaries. Perry looked the place over and it was completely charming. He spotted what he thought was probably a hooker and a trick taking a room for the night, but you got that at the Hilton, too. By the time he got home he was sure that he'd sleep like a log. He could barely keep his eyes open on the drive. But after he climbed into bed and closed his eyes, he found that he couldn't sleep at all. Something about being back in his own room in his own bed felt alien and exciting. He got up and paced the apartment and then Lester came home from his date with the Fatkins nympho, full of improbable stories and covered in little hickeys. You won't believe who's coming for a visit. Perry said. Steve Jobs. He's come down from the Lamasery and renounced Buddhism. He wants to give a free computer to every visitor, close. Perry said. Kettlebelly and Suzanne Church. Coming tomorrow for a stay of unspecified duration. It's a reunion. It's a reunion, you big son of a bitch. Woot. Woot. Perry did a little two-step. A reunion. Lester looked confused for a second, and then for another second he looked. What? Upset, and then he was grinning and jumping up and down with Perry. Reunion. He felt like he'd barely gotten to sleep when his phone rang. The clock showed 6 a.m., and it was Kettlebelly and Suzanne, bleary. Jet-lagged and grouchy from their 1-hour post-flight security processing. We want breakfast, Suzanne said. We've got to open the ride. Suzanne, at 6 in the morning. Come on, you've got hours yet before you have to be at work. How about you and Lester meet us at the IHOP, Jesus, he said. Come on. Kettlebelly's kids are dying for something to eat and his wife looks like she's ready to eat him. It's been years. Dude. Get your ass in the shower and down to the International House of Pancakes. Lester didn't rouse easy, but Perry knew all the tricks for getting his old pal out of bed. They were practically married after all. They arrived just in time for the morning rush, but Tony greeted them with a smile and sent them straight to the front of the line. Lester ordered his usual, bring me 3 pounds of candy with a side of ground animal parts and potatoes, and they waited nervously for Suzanne and the clan Kettlewell to turn up. They arrived in a huge bustle of taxis and luggage and too wide-eyed. jet-lagged children hanging off of Kettlewell and Mrs. Kettlewell, whom neither of them had ever met. She was a small, youthful woman in her mid-40s with artfully styled hair and big, abstract, chunky silver jewelry. Suzanne had gone all Eurokick, rail thin and smoking, with quiet, understated dark clothes. Kettlewell had a real daddy belly on him now, a little pot that his daughter thumped rhythmically from her perch on his hip. "Sit, sit," Perry said to them, getting up to help them stack their luggage at either end of the long table down the middle of the IHOP. Big family groups with tons of luggage were par for the course in Florida. So they didn't really draw much attention beyond mild irritation from the patrons they jostled as they got everyone seated. Perry was mildly amused to see that Lester and Suzanne ended up sitting next to one another and were already chatting avidly and close up, in soft voices that they had to lean in very tight to hear. He was next to Mrs. Kettlewell, whose name, it transpired, was Eva, as in extravehicular activity, she said, geeking out with him. Kettlewell was in the bathroom with his daughter and son, and Mrs. Kettlewell Eva seemed relieved at the chance for a little adult conversation. "You must be a very patient woman," Perry said, laughing at all the ticklish noise and motion of their group. "Oh, that's me all right," Eva said. "Patience is my virtue. And you, oh, patience is something I value very much in other people," Perry said. It made Eva laugh, which showed off her pretty laugh lines and dimples. He could see how this woman and Kettlewell must complement each other. She rocked her head from side to side and took a long swig of the coffee that their waiter had distributed around the table, topping up from the carafe he'd left behind. "Thank God for legal stimulants. Long flight, traveling with larvae is always a challenge," she said. "But they dug it hard. You should have seen them at the windows. They'd never been on a plane before. I like to go camping," she said with a shrug. "Landon's always on me to take the kids to Hawaii or whatever, but I am always like, man, you spend half your fucking life in a tin can. Why do you want to start your holidays in one? Let us go to Yosemite and get muddy. I haven't even taken them to Disneyland." Perry put the back of his hand to his forehead. "That's heresy around here," he said. "You going to take them to Disney World while you in Florida? It's a lot bigger, you know, and it's a different division. Really different feel, or so I am told. You kidding? Perry, we came here for your ride. It's famous, you know, net famous, maybe. A little." He felt his cheeks burning. "Well, there will be one in your neck of the woods soon enough." He told her about the Burning Man Collective and the plan to build one down the 101, south of San Francisco International. Kettlebelly returned then with the kids, and he managed to get them into their seats while sucking back a coffee and eating a biscuit from the basket in the center of the table, breaking off bits to shove in the kids' mouths whenever they protested. "These are some way tired kids," he said, leaning over to give his wife a kiss. Perry thought he saw Suzanne flick a look at them then, but it might have been his imagination. Suzanne and Lester were off in their own world, after all. "The plane almost crashed," said the little girl next to Perry. She had a halo of curly hair like a dandelion clock and big solemn dark eyes and a big wet mouth set between apple round cheeks. "Did it really?" Perry said. She was 7 or 8, he thought, the bossy big sister who'd been giving orders to her little brother from the moment they came through the door. She nodded solemnly. He looked at Eva, who shrugged. "Really?" he said. "Really?" she said, nodding vigorously now. There were terrorists on the plane who wanted to blow it up, but the sky marshes stopped them. How could you tell they were terrorists? She clicked her tongue and rolled her eyes. "They were whispering," she said. "Just like on Captain President and the Freedom Fighters." He knew something of this cartoon, mostly because of all the knockoff merch for sale in the market stalls in front of the ride. "I see," he said. "Well, I am glad the sky marshes stopped them. Do you want pancakes? I want caramel apple chocolate pancakes with blueberry banana sauce," she said, rolling one pudgy finger along the description in the glossy menu, beneath an oozing food porn photo. "And my brother wants a chocolate milkshake and a short stack of happy face clown waffles with strawberry sauce, but not too many because he's still a baby and can't eat much. You'll become as fat as your daddy if you eat like that," Perry said. Eva snorted beside him. "No," she said. "I am gonna be a fatkins, I see," he said. Eva shook her head. "It's the goddamned fatkins agitprop games," Eva said. They come free with everything now: digital cameras, phones, even in cereal boxes. You have to eat a minimum number of calories per level or you starve to death. This one is a champion, I am nationally ranked. The little girl said, not looking up from the menu. Perry looked across the table and discovered that Suzanne had covered Lester's hand with hers and that Lester was laughing along with her at something funny. Something about that made him a little freaked out, like Lester was making time with his sister or their mom. Suzanne, he said, what's happening with you these days? Anyway, Petersburg is what's happening with me, she said, with a hoarse little chuckle. Petersburg is like Detroit crossed with Paris. Completely decrepit and decadent. There's a serial killer who's been working the streets for 5 years there, and the biggest obstacle to catching him is that the first cops on the scene let rubberneckers bribe them to take home evidence as souvenirs. No way, Lester said. Oh, da, big vey, she said, dropping into a comical Boris and Natasha accent. Bolshoi vey, so why are you there? It's like home for me. It's got enough of Detroit's old brutal, earthy feel, plus enough of Silicon Valley's manic hustle. It just feels right. You going to settle in there? Well, put that way. No, I cool DNT hack it for the long term. But at this time in my life, it's been just right. But it's good to get back to the States, too. I am thinking of hanging out here for a couple months. Russia's so cheap. I've got a ton saved up. Might as well blow it before inflation kills it. You keep your money in rubles. Hell no, no one uses rubles except tourists. I am worried about another run of US inflation. I mean, have you looked around lately? You reliving in a third world country. Buddy. A waiter came between them, handing out heaping, steaming plates of food. Lester, who finished his first breakfast while they waited, had ordered a second breakfast, which arrived along with the rest of them. Mountains of food stacked up on the table. Side plates crowding jugs of apple juice and carafes of coffee. Incredibly, the food kept coming: multiple syrup jugs, plates of hash browns, baskets of biscuits and bowls of white sausage gravy. Perry hadn't paid much attention when orders were being taken, but from the looks of things, he was eating with a bunch of IHOP virgins, unaccustomed to the astonishing portions to be had there. He cocked his funny eyebrow at Suzanne, who laughed. Okay, not quite a third world country. But not a real industrial nation anymore. Either. Maybe more like the end days of Rome or something. Drowning in wealth and wallowing in poverty. She forked up a mouthful of hash browns and chased them with coffee. Perry attacked his own plate. Kettlewell fed the kids, sneaking bites in between, while Eva looked on approvingly. You a good man. Landon Kettlewell, she said, slicing up her steak and eggs into small, precise cubes, wielding the knife like an artist. You just enjoy your breakfast, my queen, he said, spooning oatmeal with raisins, bananas, granola and boysenberry jam into the little boy's mouth. We got you presents, the little girl said, taking a break from shoveling banana chocolate caramel apples into her mouth. Really? Perry raised his funny eyebrow and she giggled. He did it again, making it writhe like a snake. She snarfed choco banana across the table, then scooped it up and put it back in her mouth. She nodded vigorously. Dad, give them their presents. Kettlewell said. Someone has to feed your brother, you know, I'll do it. She said. She forked up some of his oatmeal and attempted to get it into the little boy's face. Presents. Kettlewell dug through the luggage cluster under the table and came up with an overstuffed diaper bag, then pawed through it for a long time, urged on by his daughter who kept chanting presents. 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 While attempting to feed her little brother, Eva and Lester and Suzanne took up the chant. They were drawing stares from nearby tables, but Perry didn't mind. He was laughing so hard his sides hurt. Finally Kettlewell held a paper bag aloft triumphantly, then clapped a hand over his daughter's mouth and shushed the rest. You guys are really hard to shop for, he said. What the hell do you get for two guys who not only have everything, but make everything? Suzanne nodded. Damned right. We spent a whole day looking for something. What is it? Well, Kettlewell said. We figured that it should be something useful. Not decorative. You guys have decorative coming out of your asses. So that left us with tools. We wanted to find you a tool that you didn't have, and that you would appreciate. Suzanne picked up the story. I thought we should get you an antique tool, something so well made that it was still usable. But to be useful, it had to be something no one had improved on, and that had in fact been degraded by modern manufacturing techniques. At first we looked at old tape measures, but I remembered that you guys were mostly using keychain laser range finders these days. Screwdrivers, pliers, and hammers were all out. I couldn't find a damned thing that looked any better than what you had around here. The state of the art is genuinely progressing. There were a lot of nice old brass spirit levels and hand-lathed plumb bobs, but they were more decorative than useful by a damned sight. Great old steelwork helmets looked cool, but they weighed about 100 times what the safety helmets around here weigh. We were going to give in and try to bring you guys a big goddamn tube amp, or maybe some Inuit glass knives, but I didn't see you having much of a use for either. Which is how we came to give up on tools per se and switched over to leisure sports tools. There was a much richer vein. Wooden bats, oh yes, and real pigskin footballs that had nice idiosyncratic spin that you'd have to learn to compensate for. But when we found these, we knew we'd hit pay dirt. She picked up Kettlewell's paper sack with a flourish and unzipped it. A moment later she presented them with two identical packages wrapped in coarse linen paper hand-stamped with Victorian woodcuts of sporting men swinging bats and charging the line with pigskins under their arms. Ta-da! The kids echoed it. These are the best presents. The little girl confided in Perry as he picked delicately at the exquisite paper. The paper gave way in folds and curls, and then he and Lester both held their treasures aloft. Baseball gloves, Perry said. A catcher's mitt and a fielder's glove. Kettlewell said. You look at that catcher's mitt. 1910. It was black and bulbous, the leather soft and yielding, with a patina of fine cracks like an old painting. It smelled like oil and leather, an old rich smell like a gentleman's club or an expensive briefcase. Perry tried it on and it molded itself to his hand, snug and comfortable. It practically cried out to have a ball thrown at it. And this fielder's glove. Kettlewell went on, pointing at the glove Lester held. It was the more traditional tan color, comically large like the glove of a cartoon character. It too had the look of ancient, well-loved leather. The same mysterious smell of hide and oil. Perry touched it with a finger and it felt like a woman's cheek, smooth and soft. Rawlings XPG6. The Mickey Mantle. Early 1960s. The ultimate glove, you got the whole sales pitch. Huh, darling. Eva said, not unkindly, but Kettlewell flushed and glared at her for a moment. Perry broke in. Guys, these are wow. Incredible. They better than the modern product. Suzanne said. That's the point. You can print these or fab these. They wonderful because they so well made and so well used. The only way to make a glove this good would be to fab it and then give it to several generations of baseball players to love and use for 50 to 100 years. Perry turned over the catcher's mitt. Over 100 years old. This wasn't something to go in a glass case. Suzanne was right. This was a great glove because people had played with it, all the time. It needed to be played with or it would get out of practice. I guess we're going to have to buy a baseball. Perry said. The little girl beside him started bouncing up and down. Show him, Suzanne said, and the girl dove under the table and came up with two white, fresh hard balls. Once he fitted one to the pocket of his glove, it felt so perfectly right like a key in a lock. This pocket had held a lot of balls over the years. Lester had put a ball in the pocket of his glove. Too. He tossed it lightly in the air and caught it. Then repeated the trick. The look of visceral satisfaction on his face was unmistakable. These are great presents. Guys. Perry said. Seriously. Well done. They all beamed and murmured, and then the ball Lester was tossing crashed to the table and broke a pitcher of blueberry syrup, upset a carafe of orange juice, and rolled to a stop in the chocolate mess in front of the little girl, who laughed and laughed and laughed. And that is why we don't play with balls indoors. Suzanne said, looking as stern as she could while obviously trying very hard not to bust out laughing. The waiters were accustomed to wiping up spills and Lester was awkwardly helpful. While they were getting everything set to rights again, Perry looked at Eva and saw her lips tightly pursed as she considered her husband. He followed Kettlebelly's gaze and saw that he was watching Suzanne, who was laughingly restraining Lester from doing any more cleaning, intently. In a flash, Perry thought he had come to understanding. Oh dear, he thought. The kids loved the shantytown. The little girl Ada. Like the programming language. Eva said insisted on being set down so she could tread the cracked cement walkways herself, head whipping back and forth to take the crazy leaning buildings in, eyes following the zipping motorbikes and bicycles as they wove in and out of the busy streets. The shantytowners were used to tourists in their midst. A few yardies gave them the hairy eyeball, but then they saw Perry was along and they found something else to pay attention to. That made Perry feel obscurely proud. He'd been absent for months, but even the corner boys knew who he was and didn't want to screw with him. The guesthouse's landlady greeted them at the door, alerted to their coming by the jungle telegraph. She shook Perry's hand warmly, gave Ada a lollipop.